In this video, I will demonstrate how to change the valve stem seals. This happens to be a V8. It's a BMW N62 engine. I'll be working on one side of the V. Now, I've already removed the valve covers, the lifters, the camshaft. So if you want to see how to do that, you're welcome to. I've got another video showing that. So right now, I'm going to go straight into the valve stem seals. I'll be using a spring compression tool. Right, once you've removed all this, it's time to compress these springs and remove the keepers. Take this out and put the new valve stem seals there. Now I'm going to explain how to do this using two different methods. Now on this car you'll see there are 2 inlet and 2 exhaust valves. So this has 4 valves per cylinder, and this is a V8, so there are 8 cylinders, therefore 32 seals. On your vehicle you might find you have fewer valves. Right, now I use this tool in order to do the job. So I'm going to show you how to set this tool up, and then I'm going to show you how to change the valve stem seal using this tool. Right, now the first step I would do is to go around and loosen each one of these spark plugs. So there you can see they're actually loose. I've loosened them, and all along here they've loosened. These ones I've actually taken out, but very important is just put some paper, cloth, or some plastic just to block these holes. You don't want anything falling in there. So as you can see, I've blocked out those, and these spark plugs are all loose. Now here in the front of the engine, I've got a wrench with the number 27 on, and as you can see, I'm getting ready to crank the engine. Now when I say crank the engine, you usually do this clockwise. It's not good practice to crank the engine anti-clockwise. Now something you might notice on your car, you'll see there's quite a lot of like sediment. Look at this sediment that has built up over the years, and this is no good. You need to actually clean here. The best practice, in my opinion, would be to clean now before you change all the seals, and then when you open each one of these, you clean around there so that you actually maintain a very clean area. So I'm going to clean now, and you can see, look inside there. I mean, look in there. You can see there's all this debris that has built up over the years. So I'm going to clean it out now. Now you can use different things to clean it out. I'm going to use a toothbrush, I'm going to use a screwdriver, I'm going to use a brush here, and also just my hand and a cloth. Now you don't want anything to fall in there, so I'm just going to block that with a cloth. Right, now you can see it's been cleaned, and this is also a good opportunity to clean the surfaces and just over here, because when it's time to put the cover back, you'll find that the oil just spills over there and makes this all oily. So this is a good opportunity to get all the oil that was sitting here and here off. Right, now I'm going to show you 2 methods to get these valves to stay up. Now why I'm saying that is because you want to push the spring down. The valve must stay up so you can get access to the keepers in order for you to release that spring. So you can do this more than one way, but I'm just going to show you the compressed air method, and then I'm going to show you the rope method. Right, when it comes to changing these seals, I built up this tool as follows. Now I found that just using these posts or these brackets here on this row was enough to get those valves as well as the exhaust valves. So you don't have to keep moving this around and flipping it. I found that actually, say you could put that there and then the other one towards the back, then you'll be able to get those. Now for this explanation, I'm just putting it here so it's in the view of the camera. So I'll just be working on that valve. And now what you'll do next is you need to build up this post here. I used a socket, a nut, and then I just found a washer, and then there you go. I just used the original nut that was here for the camshaft. This rod you should actually put in first. You'll find like difficult to get it in. Can you see there? This is a bit annoying. So my advice is try and put this in before you put the bracket, and then there at the back. Now I find that this position actually worked for I think all of them. So all I need to do now is just build up the bottom, and as you can see, these threads are shorter than these. You see, that's longer than that. So I just put one socket, and then I just put the nut. This is the nut that was used for the camshaft. So there you go. I've built up that side, and I'll do the same on the other side. And you don't have to make it very tight. Right, so I can just shift this a bit more in. I can hand tighten these. What you might find is that at times you might want to shift this up and down, and you can see that the slot is wide here. So you can actually move this bracket up and down. Let's say, for example, when we get to that valve over there. Using this tool, you can see you've got many options here, and just going from memory, I can see that it looks like this. See how you can slot this pin in here and shift this up and down. Now all I do is I put that there and that over there, and voila, I'm now able to depress that first valve. But wait, before you do that, there's some very important steps you need to know. I'm just showing you how to assemble the tool. So you should be able to see how I can depress that spring. Look at that. So you can see how this rod over there gives me this leverage here to depress that spring. Right, so now you can see how you build this thing. It's very easy. Okay, so now you can see how I can get to these valves. I mean, they're the whole top row actually there, and what you might need to do is shift these along in order to get to the different valves. For example, here, if I want to get to the spark plug, and you'll see why in a second that's important, I need to move this. So I'm just going to move this, and I'm going to show you why that's important, which forms the next step of this process. Now you can see how I've shifted this and made space for me to work. As I said, this rod in this position is actually sufficient for top and bottom valves. So here we go. I just insert that like that, and as you can see, it still does the job even though that has shifted along. Right, now can you see that when I depress this, the valve is moving too? Now that's the challenge. You've got to stop that valve from moving in order for you to release the keepers so that you can get the valve stem seal out. So now I'm going to show you two methods of stopping that valve from moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the spark plug now. And there I've taken the spark plug out. Alright, so the first method I'm going to show is going to be using a compressor. And here's the fitting for the compressor. It comes in the kit with this tool. And what you're going to do is you're going to insert that in there. But before you do that, you've got to make sure the piston is at the top dead center. So what happens is I'm going to put this spring in there, and I'm going to crank the engine until this thing is at its highest position. So I'm letting that rest, and I'm cranking the engine clockwise, remember, and you see it's going down, right, and at some point it's going to change direction and go up. Now just note, you might want to support this chain. Can you see I've got a cable tie there and a cable tie there just to support the chain. Just make sure nothing falls in there, and also just be aware of the other side of the engine, which is also turning at the same time. And as I said, try and loosen all these spark plugs before you do this. Just remember that I'm working on a V8, so that's what I mean by the other side of the engine. In your case, you may be working with a 4-cylinder engine, so you won't have an other side of the engine. Right, so I'm going to crank it some more, and you can see now it's on the way up. Now when you crank, just crank in short bursts, like 3 centimeters, 3 centimeters. You can see it's on the way up. Check it out. Check it out. There. There. Right, that's the top. You saw how it was going quite rapidly and then it slowed down. Any more cranking, it will now go downwards. If in your case you can't crank the engine, you might need to release the transmission. I'll show you that now.
I'm in the cabin now and I'm using the key part of the key fob. I've just opened that. And now I'm going to pull this handle to allow the gearbox to be neutral.
So now I can take this out, and just for your reference, if you do remove the keepers here and the valve drops, it won't fall into the engine. It will just rest on the piston itself. Right, so now I've got access to that valve, probably that valve as well. But as I said, work on one cylinder at a time. Now, if I depress that, the valve will still go down, and this is where you can choose one of two methods. Now, the first method I'm going to show you is using compressed air. This is a little pipe with a similar thread to the spark plug, and you can see that I can just slot that in there tighten it, and you can just tighten this by hand, and now you'll need a compressor to compress this cylinder. Right, you might hear some air escaping, and what I do like about this method is it also gives you an idea to see how well these valves are sealing. Now, watch here as I compress this. You see how the valve does not move. Now I can push this down, remove the keepers, remove the spring, and then change the valve stem seal. I'm still going to show you how to do this entire process, but I'm just showing you using the compressed air. Right, some of the challenges with this is obviously this gets in the way, and it's quite difficult when you're on the cylinder right over there. What's that, number 8? It's quite challenging. Alright, so this is the first method. I did use this method for a few of these, but then I changed to the rope method, and I'm going to show you the rope method now. Alright, with the rope method, you want to still put this here, and you want to let that piston go down quite a bit. So I'm going to crank the engine again in the clockwise rotation. And there we go, it's going down. Right, so that's about at the bottom, because any more and it starts coming up again. Now I take this out. Now you can get yourself about 1.5 meter piece of rope. Right, now it's up to you on the thickness you want to use. I found this thin one is perfect. Right, so you're going to take this rope and thread it into the spark plug hole all the way into the chamber. Now if your nylon rope looks like that, what I do is I just take a lighter and just light it a bit, just so that it holds together. And then if you've got strong fingers, but preferably just use a cloth and just go like this. You can see, and now it won't fray as it goes in. Right, now all you want to do is you want to push this inside there all the way, and basically thread it in here until you can't thread it anymore. Now it's time to crank the engine again clockwise, and what's happening is the piston head is going upwards, compressing the rope onto the valves, and then the valves will no longer fall in. They shouldn't even move that much, and I can see it's getting pretty tight. Now don't go crazy here, you don't need to make it very tight. Right, it kind of hits a point and it can't go anymore. Right, now as you can see, as I compress it, look at that, and you see how the valve does not move. Now ideally I recommend, if you've got two people, one person to depress here and one person to grab the keepers. Now what I've done is I've magnetized the screwdriver, a flat screwdriver, and I depress it, and then can you see how the keeper just comes out so easily because of my magnetized screwdriver. Now why I put it back is I just want to show you that if you do not take the other keeper out, it still stays in place. Now I don't think that's a shortcut to leaving it half done. It's just the nature of this design. So you need to get the other keeper as well, and sometimes you might want to come from another angle, but anyway, I'm just going to grab it there. Okay, from the back, and there comes the keeper. And can you see how the valve spring is now released? Now I can take that valve spring and the cap there and pull it out, and there is the valve stem seal. When you take out these springs, just check for sediment. You might find inside there, look at that, you see there is little bits of plastic from the old grommets from the cover, which had worn out and actually found its way here. You need to grip that seal out. Now if you can see the type of pliers I'm using, and I grip it from the side and I wiggle it. So I turn and wiggle, turn and wiggle. Then you pull it out and just make sure this area is clean. A little bit later in the video, when I show how to remove probably the most difficult seals, I'll also show in more detail about how to clean it. Now you can put this little protective cap over it so you don't damage the new seal. And just to show you, that's the old one, and here's the new one, and I just slot it over there. As you can see, I just push it on, slide it down, pull out the sleeve. So if you look inside there, you'll see some of that rubber is actually torn off, worn out, and sitting on the post, the place where you put this valve stem seal. So if you have a look at a brand new one, okay, it's got a little bit of oil on, but if you have a look, it's even got some ribs to fasten itself,
And if you have a look at the worn one, I mean, if you look inside there, those ribs are worn away and it leaves that debris. So that's why you've got to clean it. And just by the way, if you want to look at that clearance, look at the difference between the old seal and the new seal. Okay, just out of interest, I've got a vernier here. And if you look at that mouth, 4.955 at the most. It's actually tight. And let's look at the worn one. I mean, just look at that. Just look at that. I mean, that's an extra mil. Look at that. 6, and it's not even tight. I mean, look at that. So that's an extra mil and a bit. Look at that. 6.2, yeah. 6.3 and it's a bit tight. 6.36. Can you believe it? And this is about the thickness of the valve. So if I put this through here, you can see how tight that is. I mean, it barely can get through there. And if I take the worn one, I mean, I can slot it in anywhere. Look at that. I mean, it's so loose. Now you can see that this valve, I can't push it in because the rope is pushing up. So now I can put the spring back, just clean the spring, just look if there's any sediment around there. I've already cleaned it. And now you put the spring back, right, so you can see the cap is on, the spring is there. And now it's time to depress it and put the keepers back. And very important, when you push this on, don't get it stuck on the top of the valve. Can you see that I need to guide it, align it so that it slots through. So this is a little bit tricky because sometimes you'll find you have to play around with this a bit and maybe shift the bracket a bit down. Like in this case, this bracket should be shifted a little bit down. Anyway, I can still put it on in this orientation. Alright, so one keeper is in. And this is probably the most difficult part, is getting these keepers back in. Now what I found works best is if you can get that one to sit towards the bottom, then gravity holds it in place. Then you put the next one on the top. So you want to let that one move a bit. So at this point I'm just doing an adjustment. So I'm opening that and I'm just taking my magnetized screwdriver, and all I'm doing is I'm just trying to move this keeper downwards. And as you can see there, it is now at the bottom, so gravity is going to help me now when I open this again and I bring the top keeper. Now when I say top keeper, it doesn't matter which one you put where, I'm just mean that I'm calling it a top keeper because this keeper is going at the top. They're exactly the same item. As you can see, I've come in there at the top, gravity helped me at the bottom, and then I can release. The keeper is in now.
Now, if you're not working on a V engine, then gravity wouldn't really help you. So you can put the one keeper on the left-hand side and then the one on the right-hand side.
So both keepers are in, and that one is effectively done. Now, this is what I use. I use a neodymium magnet, and you can see how magnetic it is, how much magnetic force it's got. And there's one spare keeper. Now, you should get a few of these keepers. And as you can see, you magnetize your screwdriver, and I'm sure there's fancy tools you can buy that allow you to place keepers. But what I do is I just take the keeper, I get it to the tip of my flat screwdriver, and I guide it in like that. Now, something you need to know is this is directional. If you have a close look at this, you'll see that it's got a profile. You can't let it go in like that. You'll find that it doesn't work. So this thing can only go in one direction. So it's narrower at the base and fatter towards the top. And one of the reasons why I keep a magnet here is as I bring the keeper, you can see I can just let it go there. And it stays here. It doesn't get bumped, doesn't fall in the engine. Alright, so you've done that one, then you'll do that one. So then you've done the inlet. Now because you've got the rope in this cylinder, now you can do the exhaust. Right, now say for example you finished the top, and now it's time to come to the bottom. Now what I found on this N62 engine, you don't need to move this tool. All you need to do is change the shape of the handle. Right, so you can see there, I've shifted that from there to there. I just removed that pin and put it there. And now I need to line this up for the exhaust. And then you're done. This cylinder is complete, and now you can release the pressure on this rope. You might find this rope is difficult to pull, so what I recommend you do is release the pressure on that rope. So just go like 1/32 of a turn, like just a nudge.
in the anti-clockwise direction. Now I know you're not supposed to put an engine anti-clockwise, but it's just a nudge. And as you can see how easy this rope comes out. Now you're going to do that for all the cylinders. Right, just don't forget to put the spark plug back. You don't want to ever leave an opening into the engine because something could fall in. So you don't have to do it completely tight now, but just make sure that there's something blocking that hole. Right, now I've made the space and I can now work on the next cylinder. Right, so follow the same procedure. Open the spark plug, get the rope in there so you can see. I'm going to find out where the piston is. Crank the engine. Once the piston's at the bottom, feed the rope in there. Crank the engine to bring this to the top. Take your tool, release these 4 valves and reinstall the seals. Right, on this car, this is a V8, so you're going to have to do this 32 times. Now you can see how dirty this is. You can't put a new stem seal while it's still dirty, so it won't make a proper seal. So what you have to do is you have to clean it, and I've got a cotton bud, and all I'm doing is I'm removing this old sediment. If you have a look closely, it's not just oil, there's actually sediment there. It's the broken or decayed plastic from the old seal. Now you might find in these corners some debris. Just make sure you clean it out. Right, so there you can see I've cleaned this area, and now I can put the seal on and the spring. Alright, to clean it I use rubbing alcohol, and I'll put it on this. It displaces the oil and also cleans the sediment away. This is an earbud, and I just do it in a circular motion, and then it actually makes it dry. Alcohol's got a very good capacity for making things dry. Then I blow it out with a blower. I'll show you. Now you can see it's clean, and the platform where the new seal is going to sit is clean. That means that this can be flush on that. Now if you just put this on, it's fine. Just come with that so that you don't damage the little rubber there at the top. So if you want to, you can use that. And you can see how I slide that on, and then I can pull that out. Right, just some advice. Don't go and take tools and try and push that thing down. It's already going to go down when you put the spring on. So there's the spring, and as you can see, that the minute you depress that spring will then push onto that valve stem seal, which will then mate with that surface. So my advice is don't try and push this thing flush. You see, look what's happening there. It becomes unbalanced, and the last thing you want to do is change the shape of this thing. So just leave it. And what will happen is when you put the spring on, you'll find that it depresses it anyway. So you could just put that there, and then when you depress it and put the keepers on, you'll see that this depresses that all the way in. Now this V8 engine has a cylinder right towards the firewall. It's very challenging to get to here, so I'll just show you what I did on this particular car. So if you have a car like this, you can see how to get to the end there without having to compromise your work. Now these valves on the bottom right here are probably the most difficult, and you can see even the tool doesn't quite fit. So what you might have to do is just support the tool a little bit. As you can see, I'm actually resting the tool over there. I'm going to seat the tool on the spring, and then I'll put it in the groove. Now what I mean is, as you can see, it's not quite in the groove there, and the reason being is if I put it in the groove, the angle is too acute, and what happens is it actually pushes the valve in. So what you want to do is you want to support this with your hand and make sure that when you depress this, you're not pushing the valve head or the valve into the cylinder. You actually just want to make sure the valve pops through. There we go. See, so if I just go like this, you can see the valve just going with it. So what I need to do is just guide it with my hand so that I go, let the valve come through the hole. There we go. Now you can see the valve head. Look at that. There it comes. So you have to hold it. You have to guide it. Otherwise you end up just pushing the valve in. Okay, more. Okay, let go slowly. More. Yes, you won't go round. Okay, open it a little bit. Okay, there. Don't move. I'll tell you when. Just hang on. Okay, open. More.
Wait, stop. Okay, more. Okay, bit more. Okay, stop. Okay, close slowly. Wait, it's not seating nicely. Okay, open a bit. Flip. Go wait, stay there. Okay, close slowly. More. Just remember that when you do depress it, don't push the valve in. Make sure the valve comes to the center. If you have a look there, can you see that by pressing it, I'm just pressing on the valve. So the valve is not going to come to the center. You've got to use your hand to support that spring, to guide it, almost lean it upwards so that the valve stem actually comes through the middle part there. If you have a look now, I'm just depressing that valve into the cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just leaning it. Can you see that? I just allow it to lean. I'll show you that again. The angle at which you press is very important. See there, I can get to the valve to put the keepers on.
Now, in some engines, it's quite hard to get to the valves. So if you have two people, it helps a lot. And here is one of the ways we did it. You lean over the engine as I show.
Now, to get to this one, as you can see, my assistant is pulling from that direction. So he's leaning over the engine, which gives me space to come in from here. In order to seat these keepers, I came in from the firewall side. Both of them, I came in that angle. This particular car does not have a difference between inlet and exhaust springs, and if I measure it, this car has the same springs for inlet and exhaust, but in my opinion, try to put the springs back in the same place.
Right, now just having a look here, here's an example of an inlet and exhaust spring. You can see they're different. So here's an example of why you mustn't mix these springs up. And then another point is, can you see the bottom part of the spring is actually wider than the top part? So just make sure you know the orientation of the spring.
If you find the valve is fallen in a little bit, what you can do is you can just put your screwdriver here and then just pull the valve out a bit. There you see where the collet would normally sit. Now you can see the valve stem is out completely.
If the valve keeps moving too much into the cylinder, well then that would also mean that the rope you've put in has not found its way to that part of the cylinder. So unfortunately you would have to then redo the rope until it is blocking that valve from shifting in and out. A little bit of movement is fine because you can just lift the valve as I showed you with the screwdriver. But if you find that it's moving too much, well then the rope that you put in the cylinder was not finding its way to that part of the valve.
Now here's a tip: when you're on your way bringing the collet, don't knock anything. If you knock something en route, even if you knock with your finger, say you knock with your finger, it'll vibrate, it'll knock the collet off and it'll fall into the engine.
Now, if you're finding it very difficult to place these collets or these keepers, there's more than one method. Now, another method is to use two hands. If somebody else can hold the spring compressor, then what you'll do is you'll hold it with the one screwdriver on the one side and the other screwdriver on the other side, which I'll demonstrate shortly. In this case, you don't use gravity, you use the force of the screwdrivers.
Now you can also just place it on the side like that and hold it there. Now, if you noticed how I kept it there, I placed it on the side and then I almost stroked it on and pulled away. If you pull away this way, you'll see it'll come off. So you kind of put it on there and stroke it on. Now the next one, I'll just put it on the other side. And there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to support this one that I've just placed. I'm going to just hold it in place with the screwdriver, and now I'm going to place the other collet on the other side. Press hard as you can all the way. Yeah. Right, so I'm actually holding them, one on the right hand side, one on the left hand side, and now I can release that thing slowly. Release slowly. Okay. There we go. You can see that as I depress it, look at that, the keepers are not coming loose, and sometimes you'll find that it's a bit stuck. My advice in this case is just to rock it a bit. Don't depress it too hard, and maybe just come from a slightly different angle,
And there you can see there came the keepers, and I'll just grab them with my magnetized screwdriver. Now another tip is just let this out smoothly and put your hand here to grab the cap. So there's the spring in the cap, and if you release it too much, the cap might fly off. Right, now it's time to reinstall. Just check that all the keepers are in place. Check there's no debris there. On this particular car, it was faster to work on one cylinder and remove all 4 of the springs. Remember, 2 inlet to exhaust. It depends on the car and depends on the spring compression tool. You might find that the tool has to be rebuilt for each side of the inlet or the exhaust. Remember to make sure the area is clean. Check your work. Check that the collets are in place. If you are finding it difficult to seat the valve stem seal, just put a drop of oil on the inside and then it will allow you to seat it much easier. Thanks for watching. Cheers.